Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to worship with the community of Westside Unitarian Universalist Church, where compassion leads us to work for justice and equality. My name is Michael Munoz, and I am your worship leader this morning. I'm glad you are joining us for the service today. It is my hope that this gathering will renew your sense of community and connection and nourish your heart, mind, and spirit. Thank you to our AV team volunteers today, host Caroline Dixon and co-host Sue Anderson and Cindy Fountain. A special thanks to Yuki Komamoto for selecting and playing beautiful music this morning. The service, as well as our loyal Director of Lifespan Religious Education, Nikki Kennedy, for her selection and execution of our Time for All Ages. At Westside, we are raising the next generation of Unitarian Universalists, and we want them to know that they are an important part of our community. Several years ago, we chose to be radically inclusive and to adopt a multi-generational worship, where our services include all family members. So, welcome to all children and youth of all ages. Westside is a community of many beliefs, genders, and sexualities, a community of diverse racial and class backgrounds, a community of varied abilities and gifts. Some here find inspiration in the great books, others in the great outdoors, and others still in great conversations. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. If you are so moved, you can try the chat feature on Zoom by typing in some words of welcome to both members and visitors who are joining us this morning. On behalf of this church community, I say to all, welcome. A special programming note. Please stay on at the end of the service for an update from our Board of Directors, President Janelle Weber, about outcomes from their May 1st planning meeting, in addition to a breakout room to discuss today's service and visitor breakout room. We will have a breakout room option with members of the board to further discuss the building reopening plans, as well as plans for our next minister. Our guest in our pulpit this morning is Kiya Heartwood. She is an award-winning roots, rock, and folk singer-songwriter and composer. Kiya is the artistic director of the People's Orchestra of Austin, a graduate of Starr King School for the Ministry, and a permacultural designer at a Unitarian Universalist ministerial candidate. We are thrilled to have her as a part of our service today. Now, I invite you to take a deep breath. And from wherever you are, settle into this sacred space that we created together. Now let us worship together as we listen to this morning's prelude. Our opening words are from Reverend Tania Marquez, entitled Call from the Past. From the heights of the Andes, the jungle, and the desert, from the depth of the sea, From a time that was, from a time that stretches beyond our memory, we are called. Our histories stretch back to the first people, the first steps, the collision of worlds, the abrupt beginnings, all wonders of this land. We have inherited an unfinished labor of our ancestors, of those that came before us. We are called to continue the work. Our opening hymn this morning is Hold On by Kiya Heartwood.
Well, I can't go back, and I can't move on, and I've lost my faith, and I don't belong. I keep calling out, but I'm losing ground.
The flaming chalice is our Unitarian Universalist symbol of both the heritage of our past and the light of hope within this congregation today. Join me in lighting your chalice at home to the words of the Reverend Tania Marquez. The voice of our people call us now. The world harbors their joys and their sorrows. We hear the cries of our people demanding justice. That the call, we recognize the voice of those who wander in the desert, the border crossers, the navigators, the justice seekers, the dreamers, and the hopeful. We weave our story to the story of our ancestors, right here, right now. We are in the midst of responding to the call that comes from all the corners of this land, from the south, the north, the east, and the west. We are called to sustain the work. I invite you to light the chalice now, please.
There is always a light. When we're ready to see it, there is always a light. When we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always a light.
There is always a light.
There is always a
When
light.
we're ready to see it, there is always a light.
There is always a
When
light.
we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always a light.
Shine,
There is always a light.
when we're ready to see it, shine,
There is always a light.
when we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always a light. There is always a light. There is always a light. There is always a light.
Please join me in reciting the congregation's affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another.
Wiggling Worms at Work by Wendy Pfeffer, illustrated by Steve Jenkins. Published by HarperCollins. Down in the ground under your feet, thousands of worms wiggle around flower bulbs and tunnel under trees. They twist and turn, eating almost anything in their way. These wiggling worms are at work. Farmers plow their fields to loosen the soil. Crumbly soil lets the roots of plants spread out and grow. Worms also loosen the soil as they wiggle along. They are called nature's plows. As worms twist and turn, they push aside loose soil. This creates tunnels. Air flows along these tunnels. Rainwater trickles down, roots drink it up. Moist ground helps plants grow better. Worms tunnel in hard, packed soil by swallowing it. The soil goes in the worm's mouth, slides into the crop, then passes down to the gizzard. Worms do not have teeth. Mussels, fine grains of sand, and small stones in the gizzard grind the soil. Worms digest leaf and plant bits that are found in soil, just as you might digest a salad. What's left passes through the worm's body and comes out its tail end in the form of pellets, called worm castings. These castings make good plant food. They help fruits and vegetables grow bigger and better. Sometimes worms crawl above the ground. When they tunnel back down into the ground, they pull dead leaves and plants down with them. These plants make the soil better as they rot. Seeds come down too. Some of these seeds send out roots. Seedlings sprout. Worms help new plants begin to grow. Worms can wiggle, twist, turn, and even tie themselves into knots because they have no backbones. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments. These segments act like the coils on a slinky toy. They let the worm bend. A worm has no legs, but 8 bristles under each segment act a little like legs. They help the worm move. Strong muscles allow the worm to stretch out its front end. It becomes long and thin. Then the worm fastens its front bristles to the soil. The back end slinks up, making the worm short and fat. The worm wiggles along, stretching and slinking, stretching and slinking. With all its wiggling, twisting, and turning, it's a wonder a worm knows where it's headed. It has no eyes, no nose, no ears, and hardly any brain at all. But a worm knows what's happening nearby. It feels vibrations on the ground and senses a hungry robin. Quickly, the worm slips back into its burrow. Hiding is the only way it can protect itself from enemies. Worms also hide from the sun. They must live in damp soil since they breathe air through their moist skin. In the hot sun, their skins dry up and they can't breathe. Sometimes worms crawl to the surface to find food. They select dead and decaying plants to drag back to their burrows. These plants contain bacteria that worms eat. Healthy plants do not. Worms pick leaves with pointed ends rather than round ones. No one knows why. Worms also eat fungi and mold. They slurp the hair-like strands of mold the same way you might slurp strands of spaghetti. Worms eat at the entrance of their burrows. Then each worm covers any leftover plants with its castings. This pile of worm castings is called a midden. It hides the top of the worm's burrow and acts like a door to keep out bad weather and rain. In spring, before the weather warms, worms wiggle to the surface to mate. Worms are different from most other animals. Each worm is both male and female, but each one still needs a mate. After mating, each worm crawls back into its burrow. When the weather cools, a ring-like cocoon forms near the head of each worm that has mated. Slowly, the worms begin to move backward. The cocoon inches forward on the worm's body, just like a ring on your finger would move. The cocoon passes over openings in the worm's body. Up to 30 eggs slip out of the openings and into the cocoon. In a few minutes, the cocoon slips off the worm's head, just as the ring would slip off your finger. The ends of the cocoon close. Inside the cocoon, the eggs are fertilized. In about 3 weeks, the eggs hatch. Out of about 30 eggs, only 3 or 4 wormlets emerge from each cocoon. They look like tiny pieces of cotton thread, less than an inch long, but they are fully developed worms and live completely on their own. They do not need their parents' help. The wormlets inch along, finding bits of dead plants to eat, dragging them to their tunnels and covering any leftovers with their castings. They wiggle underground, loosening the soil and making tunnels. Even tiny wormlets help the soil. These babies grow fast. In 6 weeks, they are adult worms. In winter, the soil near the surface freezes. The worms plug up their tunnels and move down to warmer soil. They stay there until spring. Then they wiggle up, tunneling, twisting, and turning until they're right under your feet again. Vegetables and flowers grow better. Trees grow bigger. Grass grows greener because there are thousands of wiggling worms at work. The end. We hope that you enjoyed this reading, Wiggling Worms at Work. Let's read and find out science. Please give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe.
Good morning, Westside. My name is Nicole Kennedy, and I am the interim DLRE here at Westside. And today, you may have figured out, we are talking a little bit about agriculture, which is a pretty big word, but it has a lot to do with soil. And one of the things we need most for good soil are worms. So that's why today we read a book about worms. One of the things that I was really excited about to share with you is that after it rains on days like today, I see worms everywhere. So maybe you can go outside when it stops raining and carefully walk on your sidewalk and see how many worms you see. We're so happy you guys are all here today and have a beautiful week.
Just checking to see if 3.0 was in there.
Thank you, Nikki. Our joys and concerns will be shared by Kelly Flanagan, a representative of the Pastoral Care team.
As we share our joys with others, those joys are multiplied. When other hearts know our joy shines all the brighter. As we share our concerns, our community can offer its care. When other hearts know our sorrow, our burden becomes lighter. This is the time in our service when we offer witness and support for one another's journeys. Please post in the chat if you have a joy or concern you would like to share with everyone today and those who will watch the recording later. Joys and concerns can be submitted at any time via email to pastoralcare@westsideuu.org or through the web form located on the Care and Support page of the church's website. This week's joys and concerns include from Debbie Rake, a joy. My granddaughter Sophia got her first COVID shot. From Christina, Daryl, Maddie, and Martin Sellers, joy for cool weather and rainy days. Oh, from Nicole Kennedy, joy, all the worms we will see this week. There should be a lot of them. Joy from Barbara Crotty, I planted one of the planters in the courtyard at church. A joy from Carol Kappa and Sue Spell. It's getting closer to the end of school. Thank you for sharing those with us. It is good to share with one another, as sharing draws our community closer together. Please know that our pastoral care associates are available to support you with deep listening and, when needed, through our InReach Fund for short-term financial support of members in need. We are here for you.
Thank you, Kelly. This morning's centering song is 387, The Earth, Water, Fire, Air, performed by Kiya Heartwood. Then Diane Austin will leave us in our meditation of shared compassion.
The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, the earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return.
I invite you to join me in a time of centering. Each week here at Westside, we open our hearts to those in our community who know both joys and challenges, and to all suffering beings. I will begin with a pastoral introduction before we move into a time for silent reflection. The prayer bowl will sound to signal the start of the time for your own meditation, prayer, or reflection, and it will sound again at the end. This meditation on compassion is from Jack Cornfield, with a little editing for our Zoom gathering. May you be held in compassion. To cultivate compassion, let yourself sit in a centered and quiet way. In this traditional form of practice, you will combine a repeated inner intention with visualization and the evocation of the feeling of compassion. As you first sit, breathe softly and feel your body, your heartbeat, the life within you. Feel how you treasure your own life, how you guard yourself in the face of your sorrows. Now bring to mind someone close to you whom you dearly love. Picture them and feel your natural caring for them. Notice how you hold them in your heart. Then let yourself be aware of their measure of sorrows, their suffering in life. Feel how your heart opens to wish them well, to extend comfort, to share in their pain and meet it with compassion. This is the natural response of the heart. May you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May your heart be at peace. Imagine that they turn their compassionate gaze back to you and acknowledge the measure of sorrows you carry. They say to you with tenderness the same phrases. May you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May you be at peace. Take in these compassionate wishes and let them touch your heart. After a time receiving their care, direct the same compassion to yourself. May I be held in compassion. May my pain and sorrow be eased. May I be at peace. Begin to extend compassion to others you know. Picture these individuals, one after another. Hold the image of each in your heart. Be aware of their difficulties and wish them well. Then you can open your compassion further, a step at a time, to the suffering of your friends, to your neighbors, to your community, to all who suffer, to difficult people, to your enemies, and finally to the brotherhood and sisterhood of all beings. Sense your tender-hearted connection with all life and its creatures. Relax and be gentle. Breathe. Let your breath and heart rest naturally as a center of compassion in the midst of the world. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning to you all. Westside's plate offering for May is Texas Civil Rights Project. Its mission: we are Texas lawyers and advocates for Texas communities, boldly serving the movement for equality and justice in and out of the courts. Its vision: we envision a Texas where all communities thrive with dignity and justice and without fear. Its theory of change: Texas Civil Rights Project believes that legal advocacy and litigation are critical tools to protect and advance the civil rights of everyone in Texas, particularly our state's most vulnerable populations, and to effect positive and lasting change to law and policy. We believe that by serving the rising social justice movement in Texas with excellent legal representation and bold strategies, we can respond to the needs of the communities we serve. The Texas Civil Rights Project focuses on 3 areas: criminal injustice, racial and economic justice, and voting rights. Immigrant and borderland communities are also a focus as they intersect with both criminal injustice and racial and economic justice. The Texas Civil Rights Project facilitates the Texas Election Protection Coalition of the nationwide 866R Vote Project. Westside member Cindy Fountain was a volunteer in this project during the November 2020 election. If the extreme voter suppression bills become law in Texas, this movement will become even more imperative. Please support a cause that embraces the same justice issues that are important to us at Westside. Give online now through the church's giving page or by using the Give Plus app. Select the Service Project Fund. The link will be put in the chat. You can also mail a check to the church. Thank you for your offering. Now enjoy the musical offering from our talented pianist, Yuki Kumamoto.
Thank you again for your generosity. Our reflection this morning is presented by Kiya Heartwood.
The mystic Rumi wrote, "There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. There are 1,000 ways to go home again." And I'm hoping that while we're talking about climate change this morning, and we're talking about soil and the difference between soil and dirt, I still want it to be a positive message because there are things we can do, and they're really simple things just by listening to nature. Soil scientist Asmaret Asphal Burhe talks about the 6 feet of soil that's the skin of the earth. And she says we have to stop treating it like dirt. We've lost up to 40% of our topsoil over the last 150 years. Half of the carbon dioxide that happens in the world is taken up, sequestered by the land and sea, natural ecosystems. Even now, even today, 50% of everything that happens on the planet is being assisted by the natural processes. And they will continue as long as we don't keep deforesting, cutting down the rainforest, eroding our own topsoil, all the things that we're doing. As we put more concrete down, that heats up the planet. The plants can't do their thing. The plants take care of us if we take care of them, and we haven't been taking care of them. Think of it like this. Soil security is food security. The more we take care of the soil biology of the soil, the more likely we will have restorative and better future for our children, and that there will be enough food for the people on the earth and all the beings. And we want as much diversity as possible. We want as much soil covered as possible. Right now, there's about 3 pounds of pesticides being sprayed for every human on the planet. And all those sprays kill the soil microbes that make our soil alive. It's that simple. We have to stop it. Agriculture is responsible for 1/4 of all the carbon emissions. Think about that. Just changing the way that we farm could save the world. Fritz Haber was a German scientist who's basically responsible for chemical warfare and pesticides and the gas that killed people in the Holocaust. So not necessarily the best resume to have in the world. And that he is pretty much the father of post-World War II agribusiness, the Green Revolution. And the Green Revolution's still going on. In India, Monsanto has one major enemy, and that's Dr. Vahana Shiva. And she is basically the seed saver of India and is trying to keep all the indigenous farmers who have saved seed for their particular places and all that seed diversity, all those farmers in India, trying to get them to keep saving seeds and to keep investing in their traditional and very sustainable regenerative agricultural practice and not go onto a money-based hybrid seeds and pesticides regimen. How did I get interested in this? Well, I got interested in this back in the 1990s when, remember the Biosphere Project, when they went to Oracle, Arizona, and they built this place that was 3 acres large, and they put 8 people in there for 2 years, and they were gonna like have a closed system of the earth, the biosphere 1 being the earth. Well, it didn't work. They had to add oxygen to it because here's what I got out of it. All these brilliant scientists, all these amazing people, and they still don't know how the earth works. How the earth stays alive when all the other planets seem dead. And the main thing that makes our planet so unique, the 6 feet or so of soil that surrounds the earth like a skin. In our lifetimes, we've seen lots of things. The American way is to assume it's all going to be okay somehow. And we don't really like to talk about climate change, and we don't really like to talk about that we could have actually made mistakes. You could just take the Dust Bowl. I don't feel like we get much education about the Dust Bowl, but Dust Bowl is a really great example of us losing an incredible amount of topsoil from the prairie areas of the United States because we were plowing incorrectly. And that plowing let about a third of the topsoil disappear. And people in New York City were having dust storms. So it was pretty intense, right? The scientists say that we have about 60 years to get this figured out before having so much desertification, loss of topsoil, that it starts impacting our ability to grow our food. Living soil is the key. The other thing that I found kind of surprising as I've been doing the research was to find out that soil is actually sequestering carbon. I know that trees really help and the green things really help, and without them, we don't have any oxygen to breathe. But the soil actually holds a lot of carbon. In fact, more than the atmosphere and all the plants combined is being sequestered in the soil. And as we destroy our environment and lose our topsoil through erosion or through exposing it, we're losing our ability to sequester carbon in the soil. And without carbon in the soil, it's in the air. And then it starts messing with our oxygen, and we become like the biosphere too, where we just can't breathe. Let's talk about soil and dirt. Soil is sacred. The earth is sacred. Life is sacred. We are all made up of the same stuff. Our DNA is just not that different from a fruit fly's or anything else, a tree, a grass, a microbe. In fact, our bodies are mostly microbes. Check this stuff out. I didn't make it up. What I find fascinating is that ever since World War II, when Fritz Haber actually invented it in the First World War, the German scientist started inventing the ability to make pesticides and nerve gases. And he's the same guy who's credited with being the father of pesticides, but he's also the father of the gas that killed people in the Holocaust. The American scientists were so excited about his research after World War II, and they tried to turn things that were being created for military purposes into agricultural purposes. And it worked for just a second. We had a couple of harvests where, they could have a monoculture, so we just had a field full of corn, and you sprayed that corn and killed all the bugs and the grasshoppers that were eating it, and suddenly you had a great harvest. And they thought this was going to feed the world. Well, what's true is that the more that they spray, the deader the dirt becomes. Because without the microbes in the soil, without the nematodes, without the fungi and the network of fungi in the earth, our plants have to have inputs. They have to have nitrogen added or potassium added, or you get the drift. But if the soil is living and all the elements of the soil are there, the soil food web that Dr. Elaine Ingram calls, if all those things are in the soil, you don't have to spray. It's sustainable. And the microbes are getting enough oxygen, and they are doing their thing, and they're bringing up from the rocks beneath the soil the nutrients that the plants need. And the soil can be regenerated, and not just sustainable, because we have to sustain all the carbon that's gone in the atmosphere from the last 200 years. But we also have to take care of what's happening now. And there are actually some really easy fixes if we start emulating the earth. So I know this seems a little thick, but here's the basic layout. The earth has a soil web that keeps the soil alive, like it is in the forest. And we don't have to go in and add nitrogen to the forest. The forest takes care of itself through all the mulch and all the dead plants and all the microbes and fungi breaking the stuff down, and the earthworms and the nematodes and all the magical things that are happening in the soil can regenerate itself and take care of it, take care of us. And if we eat the plants that are raised in that soil, we are healthier. The system works. The problem is, I believe that we spent at least 2,000 years kind of denigrating the earth and denigrating the idea that God or the universe made it in the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to concentrate on heaven and not on the earth. And so our scientists have not even learned how to build a biosphere. What can we do? Well, there are a lot of people doing work right now, figuring out how to save it. And I'm going to put a list of books that might be interesting to some of you about this. But there's permaculture and there's regenerative agriculture, where they don't expose the soil through plowing, where you put the plants in a cover crop and they are raised, and the cover crops are things like vetch and clover that put nitrogen back in the soil, and they don't let erosion happen. Really, we've lost a third of our topsoil since 1970. Every civilization that's made its life based on monoculture, where they grow one crop at a time, has disappeared off the face of the earth. From Greece and Rome and Egypt to the Aztecs, this is true. So the more that we can become a regenerative culture, where we have a lot of diversity in the soil and in the plants that we plant. In permaculture, you plant a bunch of plants together so that it confuses the pests, and it confuses the needs of the soil are met. So you have a nitrogen fixing plant next to one that needs a lot of nitrogen. Like, I'm sure you've heard of the Three Sisters situation, where they had corn and squash and beans. And the beans are legumes, and they put the nitrogen back in the soil. And the squash is keeping the weeds from coming up because it's got these big giant leaves, and it grows up the corn stalks. And that's a very Native American way of doing things. And they were pretty sustainable. A lot of indigenous people, the people in India, the people in China, for thousands of years were sustainable. They took care of the same piece of dirt. They didn't just move west when they wore out their farms like a lot of the American settlers did. But the thing that's important to know is that a lot of carbon is sequestered for thousands and thousands of years in the polar ice caps. And if they melt, they're going to let that carbon go. And when that carbon gets let go, the Earth heats up. And for every 5 degrees, we're going to have massive deserts happen. We're going to have a lack of soil for making food. And this could be a disaster. I don't believe it's going to happen because I think there's too many smart people and that they'll figure out a way to explain it. But what I want to give you all today is just some basic ideas. 1, we need all the soil beasties to stay alive. They cannot stay alive if you spray. If you spray Roundup in your garden, you're spraying stuff that came from that German scientist long ago, and basically it kills all the soil microbes. So that soil becomes dirt and becomes dead and can't regenerate itself. We need all the beasties. Dr. Elaine Ingram has a lot of work on this. You can watch her TED Talk. She's amazing. She has a PhD in soil science. She's an agroecologist. She's been doing this work for 40 years. And she explains it pretty simply how the soil food web works. I'm going to show you her diagram here. You need all these elements. She suggests you get a microscope, and that instead of doing a soil test, you just look in the microscope and make sure all the elements of the soil are there. Well, so how do you do that in a practical sense? You compost. How do you make compost? Well, basically, you put a little dirt that's alive, and you layer green stuff, dead green stuff, and brown stuff on top of each other, and it heats up and it breaks down, and the microbes start doing their work, and pretty soon whatever waste you had becomes soil, becomes compost. And adding compost is the best thing human beings can do to help the soil stay alive. Living soil holds more water, cleans more water. It also breaks down toxins. Fungi are really good at that, actually. There are mushrooms that can break down oil. There are mushrooms that can break down toxic anything. It's amazing. We have all the processes in nature to take care of us and for us to live a long time on this planet in perpetuity. We can keep this planet alive, and we can learn how it works. MLK Jr. said, "We may have come on separate ships, but we're all in the same boat now." That's so true. We're all in this boat called Earth, our blue boat home. I hope you'll give this a thought. And here's a list of books and movies that you might be interested in to get a little bit more information. Thank you.
Our closing hymn also comes from Kiya Heartwood, as well as Meg Barnhouse.
Fire at the core of our planet. Fire of the sun and stars. Spark in the spirit as we are born. Fire of being. Fire of God. Each of us, a part of the great fire burning through the universe. Inside us and outside us, above us and below us, within and around us. One light, one source, one life. Green fire burning through it all, pushing the flower through the bud, the fruit through the flower, the seed through the fruit, the living and the dying. Dark fire taking us down to the earth, to bone, to dust, to carbon. We will fall, and we will return. In the grass and in the bright green leaves of spring, in the animals who eat the grass, in those who eat the animals. Everywhere, in everything. A billion forms are made, and each has its dreams. A billion forms are made, and everything changes.
Our closing words are from the Reverend Tanya Marquez. Call from the future. The voices of those who will call us. A reminder of who we need to be. In the weaving of our story to the web of life, we must remember that we must not cut the strings, for there are others coming after us, others with tender hearts and strong wills, with creative determination, those who will live in the house of tomorrow. Their vision escapes us. Yet, we are called to prepare the road, to leave behind possibility and foundations upon which they'll build a better tomorrow. We are called to create new opportunities. Join me in the congregational closing as we extinguish our chalices. Let us go in peace, believe in peace, and create peace in our lives and in the world. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen. And now, a special message from the president of our congregation, Janelle Weaver.
Hi, Westside. Good morning. I'm Janelle Weaver. I'm your board president for another few weeks. I'm taking a few minutes today to talk to you about what the board is recommending for reopening our church. We met a few weeks ago to discuss this as a board with the reopening committee, but of course, since then the CDC has continued to issue new updates. The most important thing for you to know is this: we cannot fully reopen and use our church building until everyone, including children, has had the chance to get vaccinated. There's just no safe way otherwise to have that many folks in the building, even if they're using masks and staying distanced, unless they are vaccinated. And also, local infection rates need to be consistently low if we're going to admit visitors safely. But the good news is that it's getting easier every day to get vaccinated. As you know, vaccination for children 12 to 15 was just made available. In fact, I signed my daughter up and she got her vaccination on Thursday. And testing on shots for children as young as 6 months is already going on. So there's lots of reasons to be optimistic. But we're not there yet, and we're not going to be at full reopening probably before the fall. It seems likely to take that, it will take that long for everyone to get vaccinated and local infection rates to go down and stay down. At the meeting, our board had two recommendations. The first is that we have a phased approach to using our building and meeting together, and that we implement that plan when the new board is seated at the congregational meeting coming up on June 20th, since it will be that board's responsibility to manage all the issues that come up with it. So some phasing options that we discussed could include small groups of vaccinated people using the church for short periods, groups that include unvaccinated people using the garden outside or the outside, the parking lot, and of course, meetings taking place outside of church altogether, which is already happening. For now, what we recommend is that for those of you who are vaccinated, continue to meet safely at locations outside the church. For those groups that include unvaccinated members, please meet outdoors and continue to use social distancing, masks, and other precautions. Once the new board is in place at the beginning of July, if a fully vaccinated group wants to use the church building, the board will need to decide on whether that's safe and how to ensure that all the attendees are indeed vaccinated. If you have any questions, please feel free to email the board. It's board@westsideuu.org. That comes to all of us. And you can call any board member or just reach out to us any other way that you prefer. This has been a really hard time, a hard year for everyone, but we can see things getting better. In the meantime, we can plan to be safe and be patient a little longer so that we can all be together again safely soon. Have a great Sunday, and thanks for your time.